Well, it's a very good morning. It's a good afternoon. And for some of you, it is a good evening to you all. Welcome to the Coaching Cafe. My name is Dr. Natalie Ashdown. I am joined on the line today by the Head of Digital Skills Program for the Australian Institute of Management. Welcome to you, Lou Nor. It's lovely to see you today.
Thanks for having me again, Nat. Great to be here.
And it's a welcome back. You were so popular last week. We need to carry on our conversation, which I'm very excited to do. And today we're talking about AI and coaching ethics and what leaders and coaches need to consider when it comes to AI and ethics. So it's a big topic and we've got lots to discuss. We have people dialing in from all around the world. We've got Texas, Louisiana, KL, down the road in Hobart, across over in Perth. So many people, Tokyo represented. So welcome to you all. It's wonderful to see you. Before we begin, let us acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians on the lands on which we all meet today, and the continuing connection to the land, waters, and communities of Australia and the lands from all around the world where you're joining us today, either live or on your favourite streaming service. The podcast is going crazy, so thank you so much. We pay our respects to them and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and elders from Indigenous communities from all around the world. I have welcomed back Lou. There is so many things to discuss today. So I would really like to just do a bit of an introduction and then hand over to our expert. We want to turn our attention today to the ethical use of AI. In particular, what should leaders and coaches be aware of when it comes to the ethical use of AI? And what does good practice look like to mitigate the risks? So for those of you that are new, we always say welcome. We are all about creating shared learning experiences, having thought-provoking conversations. And if you are here to earn ICF CCEs, then yes, they are available at the end of the session if you are listening to this live. If you are new, welcome back. You know that we love this time. It's our time out for our own professional development. Please feel free to interact with us via the chatbot, I nearly said, via the chat box, and we'll pick up your questions and comments as we go along. So welcome to our community. Welcome to our thought-provoking conversations. And welcome to one of the biggest topics going around right now, not only in coaching, but also globally. So let's just first of all recap from last week. We talked about how AI is being used in coaching at the moment. It's being used in content writing, which is pretty obvious, in virtual coaching assistants, which are growing, in sophisticated data analysis, which is being used for metrics, reporting, but also for themes. There's deeper conversations and better outcomes being driven through sophisticated data analysis. In scenario simulations, which are becoming very popular, using AIs as agents for coaching, and of course for self-coaching and goal attainment. And if you pick up last week's coaching recording, we showed you a few examples of these as well. And Lou gave us insights into a number of the different ways that AI has been used in coaching. So this is my challenge to us all. It's my personal challenge as well, is that we do not keep our heads in the sand like an ostrich with our heads in the sand. We really acknowledge that we're not experts by any means in the field. What we really are trying to be is explorers and experimenters, and we really want to keep up because we need to. And one of the ways we do need to keep up is in the ethical considerations, which is why I welcomed back Lou today as well. When it comes to ethical considerations and the boundaries, the International Coach Federation has done a lot of work in this area. You can go to coachingfederation.org. Go to Embrace the Future ICF's AI standards for coaching, actually. So they have released standards. These standards are being updated because for those of you that can see the screen, they were introduced in late 2024, and so much has happened since then. But they are putting out standards for the use of artificial intelligence, particularly introducing those into coaching and coaching frameworks. What we want to have today is a more personal leadership and coaching conversation about what we should be thinking about as leaders and coaches. So, the International Coach Federations are standards for the introduction of artificial intelligence. We want to have a more of a personal conversation. And that's where I thought, let's bring back Lou from the Australian Institute of Management and let's really get your insights, Lou. So, with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing and we can just really dig into our conversation together.
Fantastic. Let's do it.
Okay, so Lou, a big question. I think where do we begin with such a huge topic? So perhaps we can begin with Lou, when you think about the ethical considerations, what leaders should be thinking about when it comes to AI, can you kick off the conversation with us? I know you've done, well, actually, firstly, I forgot last week. Can you introduce yourself and tell us why it's so important for to have you on the line with us? Tell us about your role, and then perhaps let's direct the conversation to what should leaders be thinking about when it comes to AI.
Thanks, Nat, for having me back. This is really exciting. So, for those of you who I haven't met yet, nice to meet you all. And I am Lou from the Australian Institute of Management. I currently run the digital skills portfolio that are just kicking off at AIM. My role mainly focus on probably, research and really understand what the CPOs really care about to then inform our training. And it also has to align with organizational challenges and where we're all heading, particularly in Australia. But I think these concerns are actually global. We have found that in our content, in our research, a lot of the things that we talk about are pretty much global. The concerns, for leaders everywhere at this very moment are the same, especially with the workplace and the workforce being changing so much. So yeah, I think I would probably preempt you by saying that I'm not an expert in digital skills because no one actually is. It's such a broad space. But what I am an expert in is really understand the needs of organizations in learning and in training their staff. And understanding what leaders are struggling with the most, especially executive teams, to be able to then help them with solutions, especially in digital skills, which is a big topic at the moment, like Nat just mentioned.
Yeah, and just for those of you who don't know, Open Door Coaching is now part of the broader brands, part of the Centia brands, and that's why we AIM is like a larger sister company now as well. So Lou, when you think about leaders and you think about AI and you think about ethics, what are some of the ethical considerations that come to mind when we're talking about those
Yeah.
intersects?
This is going to be a long one because I think we'll have to start and set the scene first.
Mm,
So actually yesterday we ran a responsible AI leadership webinar at AIM and we had over 400 attendees, like I mentioned in that. So we ran a little poll in the session and we understood to understand what leaders in Australia are currently concerned about the most when it
mm,
comes to AI, and then we'll go into the ethics part of it. So actually, when it comes to AI, their consideration right now at the top two are actually workforce skills and capability. And
mm,
the second one is managing risk and governance, which is related to the ethics that we're going to talk about today.
mm,
A lot of organizations are in the early adoption phase, and usage is evolving. So when it comes to ethical consideration, we have to start by understanding how it's being used in the first place. And so there's a lot of shadow AI use, as we call it, where your team actually goes about using AI without you knowing,
mm.
or not mentioning it at all. And that's where the risk and ethic consideration come from, because I'm sure people dialing in today would not be unfamiliar with the Deloitte case recently. Not that long ago, there was a really big government report that Deloitte delivered, and AI actually hallucinated the sources. So
Yeah.
when they click into the report and go through the references, some of them actually don't exist. And I think that was about a $400,000 project. So you can imagine for that scale of a problem across organizations, if this is happening, And there's also shadow AI use, and you're producing not only internal reporting, but also work for clients. What does that mean for us in terms of ethical consideration? Well, it means we don't know if we are doing the right thing. We don't know if we're producing high quality outputs. We don't know if we are actually properly checking throughout the process of producing that output, because there are many steps to be able to get to a client output. Um, and some other concerns would be privacy, right? Because a lot of organizations are starting to adopt AI, and I'm sure in coaching too. So, client data, internal information, client data, all of that, where's that going? And in Australia, we are no strangers to the recent data breaches, in some of the really big names like Optus. I was actually one of the people that got my data breach. So, that was a very big concern, right? Especially when now AI is being incorporated everywhere. What does that mean with our information? So, leaders think about the same thing for their organization, especially with the larger the organization, the larger the risk.
Yes, and I can definitely relate to what you're saying there, Lou, because I was in a seminar just today, just this week as well, with chief people officers. And the big discussion around the table was exactly what you're talking about, the risk, the governance. Are we uploading company information? If we are, and company data, where are we uploading it to? What are we using that for? And there was a lot of discussions around putting boundaries in place. I haven't heard that term shadow AI before, but I can definitely relate to that because the discussions I was having is around the boundaries. So if people are using it, we don't want to restrict them, we don't want to hold them back. But
Yeah,
what are we putting in place in terms of risk and governance?
definitely.
Very interestingly, I asked the question about who's responsible. And,
Mm,
and a couple of the organizations that were at that roundtable discussion said the board, which was so good to hear,
yeah.
meaning the board is taking responsibility for the ethical use of AI. That's how important some organizations are seeing this.
Yeah, it really is. And you know what? I think another thing that boards and executive leadership teams should probably really think about is that fairness and bias. You
Mm,
know, this is a big one. I want to separate that from the other ones that we just talked about earlier, because we've been having Learning Week in Sentia this week, and I'm proudly saying that, our team's developing all these digital skills solutions and courses, and I took one of them this
yeah.
week. I took the AI for Productivity course, and it was really eye-opening to hear from different perspectives in the room, one of which being hiring, applying for jobs, hiring. So when it comes to fairness and bias in organizations nowadays, this is only one part of it, right? Let's just say the first step that you take into an organization is when you go through the recruitment process. And a few years ago, I don't remember exactly which year, but a few years ago, Amazon hired people through using AI and screened through all the profiles based on historical data. Now, this was actually not fair to the candidates because most of the people in the historical data were male. And so, most of the females candidate was screened out. And, if you go through this case study and actually, read through it a bit more, it's quite fascinating. So obviously they introduce it and they have to take it back because that's obviously introduced that bias and, unfairness in screening and recruitment. And then if you think about, the future of work, there will be a lot of AI usage in organization that leaders will introduce to then, things like a stretch project for a team member pairing with their future potential in the organization based on historical data. Is it going to be fair? Are you actually capturing all the data? And, if we're just basing the decision on historical data, what does that mean for people that, come from backgrounds that just didn't exist in the organization before? So, things like that would raise concerns and questions around the fairness and the bias that might happen if we start just adopting AI without having, I think that would probably fall into the data consideration of your data set and your data structure. So yeah, it's a very big topic, and I often think about Gen Z who are really struggling to get into the workforce, and this is actually a very big concern for them because most of them are saying I can't even get through the screening. AI is just screening me out, right? So it's kind of like it really helps to speed up the process for organization. But on the other hand, is it fair?
Mm.
Is it actually helping everyone collectively? That's another big question that leaders probably should consider.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. Look, someone has asked, will the recording be available? And it will be available on our podcast and also on the blog. And there's so many questions I have, and I'm taking notes already from you. So thank you so much for your generosity and sharing. You've given us some really thought-provoking things to think about already. And what I was thinking about is it's so important for coaches and leaders to be aware of this because this is the context within which we are coaching.
Mhm.
So we need, as coaches, to be able to ask questions about ethics, and the ethical use of the AI if the leader has brought that topic up. So, if it's counterpart or coachee led, uh, we need to be able to ask those quality questions that come from us knowing the context and the landscape and what's going on in the world and keeping up with AI. And so that's when you said around the different examples you've been using, it generates questions for me, Lou. It generates questions in terms of, so to what extent is your would you think that the process is fair, or to what extent is the process equitable, or how would you rate the equity or fairness of the process if that's the topic we're talking about? How are we getting the best candidates, or how are you ensuring the best candidates? It's the knowledge that you're giving us, Lou, I think, that inform the quality of our questions if we're coaching
Yeah.
others or if we're leading as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as leaders.
Mm,
If you're coaching a team member,
mm.
oftentimes nowadays, even in my own conversation with my team, I'm starting to adopt some of the coaching practices that I learned from you, Nat. And so, I find that really great to then have a think about, for example, if we use the grow model that you taught us, and then, what are the options that we have? And then if one of the options comes up being AI, what are some of the follow-up questions we have to ask back, right? Because oftentimes, the solution nowadays would be, oh, let me think about how I can use AI. Sure.
Yeah.
It's great, right? We were all starting to get on the same page, but what does that actually mean? In which context can we use AI?
Mm, mm, mm. And you talk about augmenting, and you did that last week, but just quickly give us a snippet about what you mean by augmenting as well there.
Yeah, so last week we touched on augmenting the coaching practices, and I understand that it was probably a relatively new concept to a lot of us here. So to recap, what I meant by augmenting is you don't just use AI here and there for admin tasks. You don't just grab it and go when you need it, or you feel like, oh, maybe it can help me here, but actually zoom out and take an audit of everything you do in your coaching. It's
Yeah.
kind of think about your coaching as a business, and it is oftentimes a business, right? So you go through all the processes and you have the steps you have to go through, mundane things like capturing client data, then contacting the client, booking time. I know a lot of coaches are using tools to book the time to save that back and forth, for example. That is adopting it for productivity. Whereas augmenting would be when you think about the whole process of setting it up, following up, and then continuously developing exercises. So outside of the coaching session, you can keep the conversation going and allowing the participants to, or your mentees, or your, how do you call them? I'm not really sure with the terminology, but anyway.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so the people that you coach can then continue on, and then also it helps you to then capture the data. But then obviously, because we are talking about ethics and privacy, I do have to say that this is where it comes in. When you're thinking about augmenting your coaching, you also need to think about, I would probably call it like a decision block situation. In your decision blocks, what are the key things you have to consider throughout the process of augmenting your coaching? If you're introducing AI throughout the process, what would that mean for data and privacy of your client? Um, what are the things that you will never introduce AI in when it comes to your coaching?
Mm,
Um, and if you ever talk to a vendor about, certain steps of the process where they can help you and that vendor is in AI, what are some of the questions that you can ask them? What are
mm.
things that should be on the contract to make sure that you protect your clients?
Yeah, there's so much for you. There's so much. They are all great questions. So I'm really hoping that coaches and leaders that are listening might listen back as well and write down all these questions as well, because you have turned to a really important, a very important topic actually, and that is the use of client data. And we can use AI to review transcripts. And last year I showed our audience how to do that actually. And a funny thing to share with you there, Lou, was that I actually got AI to rate a transcript, which for me was clearly rubbish because I created the transcript and I was not doing coaching. I was jumping into the space and I was cutting people off and cutting the person off. So I actually produced quite a rubbish transcript.
Yeah.
Up, Uploaded that to AI this time last year. So lots happened in the year, mind you. And the AI chatbot rated my coaching really high, and I said, "Oh, I think you might be mistaken." And oh no, no, Nat, congratulations on your coaching. So things have evolved so much, but we can use AI to review transcripts. We can use AI to listen to calls. We can use AI to improve our coaching practice. We can use AI as an agent for us to practice role play. So we some people take notes and they can use AI to store their notes. So Lou, what practical advice do you have for us as leaders and coaches when it comes to thinking about all those different uses and the ethics of all of that? Just what are you thinking?
Oh, I'm smiling because this can be a whole webinar in itself.
I know.
I had to be brief. Um,
Yeah.
so just a few things that I picked up on that you said before.
Hmm.
So first of all, when you uploaded the transcript into AI a year ago, you have to remember, let's just talk about the foundational knowledge.
Hmm.
Generative AI is basically built around LLMs, large language models, and they're trained by these, major, what we would call them frontier models, like OpenAI for ChatGPT, like Anthropic for Claude, and like Gemini, by Google. So they have been trained on a certain set of data. Most of these models, when you talk to them, especially, if you think about last year, the year before, they are so positive. They
Hmm.
love everything you produce to the point that everyone starts saying, why is it just complimenting everything that I say? I kind of want it to challenge me a little bit, but that's hard because whatever you say to it, it will say, for example, I talk to my AI every day and then it'll be like, that is great, Luke. Great idea. I think this is fantastic. Something along the line of that. And it still does this. It's a little less annoying, but still does this. So what is the data set that it was trained on? And how was it trained? That's the big question. We actually don't have a lot of insights into that, especially as non-technical people. If you don't dive deeper into the world, you probably don't know. And I think it's just something to be mindful of because are they actually trained on data that would help coaches in particular?
Hmm.
First of all. And second of all, I don't think if you think about it, coaching is so personal
Hmm.
that you wouldn't find a lot of actual real data that it can train on. So that's probably why it came back to you and said that was great. That's one. And second of all, there's something called natural language processing in AI where it keeps training to then mimic human voice and be able to understand us better. So obviously, it's made headways in a year, right? So now it's probably better at that.
Hmm.
But obviously, when you think about, getting it to rate a transcript or, even a conversation, if you type it out or anything like that, that is a big question of like, does it actually know in the human context? Probably not.
Hmm.
And so coaching, I think, is really personal. It's really niche and unique. So, any, open model like ChatGPT, for example, wouldn't be able to do what you need it to do in that sense. The second thing that I will say is this is actually really interesting. When you upload anything, you have to know that if you don't have an enterprise plan, that is going to AI's data. So remember, I told you large language models get trained on data. So if you're uploading anything that you produce with your client, actual data, that's going to the internet. It's going to live there forever.
Mm.
So be really mindful of that, right? Because I also had this conversation with our team and other colleagues in Sentia recently about using a voice chat with AI, or even uploading audio. That I would recommend don't do.
Yes, yes,
Do
I
that,
agree.
right? So, but coaching, it needs to, that is what we need. And I think that's what coaches need, the feedback on the actual conversations. So, I think the practice that you mentioned, that's really good if you can role play with it. But anything like a conversation, a coaching conversation, if you needed to rate the conversation, I would probably be a bit hesitant and think about what it actually means, because obviously it cannot replace coaches. That's for sure. Um, and also there might be particular organizations or AI models that can really help with coaching in particular. So that would probably be the other thing to consider. But then again, it comes back to the question that we were just talking about before, data privacy. How am I going to actually use this? What kind of level of information do I want to disclose? Those are the questions to ask.
Yeah, I think they're very good questions. And Lou, again, I think about those questions in the context of us personally as coaches and as leaders. And then also, they're excellent questions to be asking of leaders because they inform the coaching conversation
Mm,
when the time, when the time comes,
mm.
or if the opportunity arises. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about in this space. And what I think I like is that we can tap into people like yourself, and we can explore these things. For me, it's about we do need to be having the conversation. I think that's the most important thing as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, especially when you were introducing the new AI standard by ICF earlier, I remember, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
Yes.
ethical considerations and boundaries that, yeah. So this is really great, right? I think coaches need to keep the conversation going
Mm,
and continuously upskill yourselves to understand how AI actually works.
mm,
What are the key considerations outside of this, because this is an introduction. I think it's called a standard, but I think the conversations you're going to have, especially with coaching practices between different coaches, that
mm.
is something to share and keep the conversation going about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lou, let's just, because you have been so involved, well, you are leading the field here in the development of courses. Can you tell us quickly about AIM's AI Essentials for Business and AI's Responsible AI Leadership courses? Just give us a 30-second overview because we're right on time. But tell us about this because you said you've done the course. You yourself have attended more courses this week, and I need to book myself in as well. But
Yeah.
tell us quickly about the courses that AIM have developed here as well.
So they serve two different audience. Obviously, AI Essentials is more for the individual contributors up to middle managers who wants to really upskill themselves and understand the basics of AI. And this is where a lot of people struggle because they actually don't even know where to start. What does AI mean? And, artificial intelligence keeps evolving. How do I keep learning to keep up with it? That's the idea. And then obviously the responsible AI leadership serves a slightly different audience of senior leaders up to executives. And we do customize solution for this as well to then help senior leaders in organization to really understand the consideration, like we just touched on a little bit earlier today, because this space is continuously evolving. A lot more organizations are adopting AI, and so I think they serve slightly different audience and different purposes, but the key here is that I think it's about continuously learning. Even for us developing the course, we see that, the insights change all the time. So we have to continuously update and support our facilitators to then deliver the most up-to-date insights as possible to help our learners. So hopefully I didn't speak too fast. Mindful of time, but yeah, that's the gist of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you can reach out to us at support at Open Door Coaching and pick up a discount on those courses. Still available this week as well. So thank you, Lou. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get you back actually to share even more because we do want to be explorers and experimenters, and we do want to keep up and understand the world and the context within which we're coaching. And I want to thank you so much for the last 2 weeks because you really have opened up our minds to what's possible in that regards as well. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.